A cold, weightless sensation was all that remained. Ilara Vance felt herself floating, untethered from the agony that had just torn through her body. The world had narrowed to the sterile, blinding lights of the delivery room ceiling and the distant, frantic beeping of a monitor that seemed to be counting down the last seconds of her life. She had lost too much blood. The vibrant, life-giving force that had sustained her twins was now pooling around her, a crimson testament to her sacrifice. In the haze, a figure materialized at the edge of her vision. Soft, maternal, familiar. Her mother. A woman she had never known who had perished in the exact same way, bleeding out on a delivery table 18 years ago to bring Ilara into the world. The irony was a vicious, cursed cycle, a destiny of tragic repetition. The vision of her mother faded, replaced by a face of cold, beautiful malice. Seraphina Croft, her once dearest friend, stood beside the bed. She was impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to the bloody chaos of the room. She was now the celebrated wife, the beloved companion of the man Ilara loved, Cassian Thorne. With the final dregs of her strength, Ilara's lips moved, a whisper lost beneath the medical din. "Sarah, my children, let me see them. Just once. Just one look." Seraphina leaned in, her perfume a cloying, expensive scent that made Ilara's stomach turn. A smile, sharp and cruel, played on her lips. "Your children," she murmured, her voice a venomous silk. "Once you're gone, they'll be mine. A pathetic little country mouse like you, crawling out of some forgotten backwoods county. How dare you lay a finger on my Cassian? How dare you think you were worthy of carrying the Thorne heirs?" The words were the final blow. Ilara's heart, already faltering, shattered. Her eyes, wide with despair and betrayal, refused to close. She died staring at the woman who had stolen her life, her love, and now her legacy. The last sound she heard was not the comforting cry of her newborns, but the doctor's resigned sigh as he noted her time of death. "A shame," he muttered to a nurse. "There was enough blood in the bank. And this family clearly isn't lacking money. Why did they just give up on saving her?" The darkness swallowed her whole. A sudden violent burst of light. A cacophony of clicks and shouts. Ilara gasped, her lungs filling not with the sterile air of a hospital, but with the thick, humid heat of a summer afternoon. She was standing on a sun-drenched stage, microphones thrust in her face, cameras flashing like a swarm of fireflies. Dizziness washed over her. The metallic scent of blood was gone, replaced by the smell of cut grass and cheap perfume. A gentle hand touched her arm. "Ilara? Sweetie, are you out of your mind with joy?" It was her Aunt May, her face beaming with pride and concern. "The reporters are asking how it feels to be admitted into Ethelred University as the national top scorer. Don't you want to share some advice with your juniors?" The words slammed into her. Ethelred University. National top scorer. This was the brightest day of her 18 years. The day her hard work had paid off. The day her future had seemed limitless. And she now remembered with a chilling clarity, the day that had sealed her fate 12 years later. This was the day she had first met Seraphina Croft. As if summoned by her terrifying thought, the crowd parted. There they were. Silas Croft, a man whose refined, approachable demeanor radiated the poise of a successful businessman, and beside him his daughter Seraphina. She was a vision in a pristine white princess gown, a living porcelain doll whose radiance made Ilara's simple, shabby clothes seem even duller. Just as he had in her previous life, Silas Croft addressed the reporters with practiced ease. "I'm originally from Oakhaven County," he announced, his voice booming with false warmth. "When I heard our little county had produced the national top scorer, how could I not come and show my support? The Croft Foundation will donate a scholarship of 500,000 yuan to Miss Ilara Vance so she can devote herself to her studies. After graduating from Ethelred University, she can contribute to our hometown and to our country." He paused, placing a paternal hand on Seraphina's shoulder. "And my daughter Seraphina has also been accepted into Ethelred. The two of you will be classmates now. Please get along and grow together. Don't bring shame to Oakhaven County." The trap was being laid again. The generous donation, the public tying of their fates. In her first life she had been so grateful, so blinded by the staggering sum of money. She had spent her college years in servitude to Seraphina, a grateful lackey forever in debt to the Croft family's generosity. But not this time. As the reporters turned to her, expecting a tearful acceptance speech, Elara straightened her shoulders. She met Silas Croft's eyes and then smiled calmly at the cameras. "Thank you, Mr. Croft, for your generous support and your deep care for our hometown," she began, her voice steady, clear, and carrying across the crowd. "However, after the college entrance exam, I've been working as a tutor. I'll have enough saved up to cover my tuition and living expenses before school begins." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Silas's gracious smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the corners. Elara continued, her gaze sweeping over to the beaming principal of her high school. "Therefore, I'd like to redirect the 500,000 yuan scholarship and ask Mr. Croft to donate it to Oakhaven High School instead." She paused for effect, letting her next words hang in the air. "Many of my classmates have had to drop out due to poverty. Too many have given up their education to work and support their families. I hope this money will give them the chance to change their destinies too." The principal looked like he'd won the lottery. The reporters, sensing a far more compelling story than a simple donation, went into a frenzy. Silas Croft's face was a masterpiece of controlled fury, but he was a prisoner of his own public image. He had to agree and even magnanimously pledged to make it an annual donation. The narrative was no longer about the Croft family's charity. It was about Elara Vance, the poor, brilliant, and fiercely independent girl who thought of others before herself. The video went viral, sparking national conversations she had never seen in her first life. As the chaos died down, Elara felt a grim satisfaction. She had drawn first blood. The game had changed. But as she caught a glimpse of Serafina's perfectly composed face, she saw a flicker of cold, calculating interest in her eyes. The rejection had not deterred her. It had intrigued her. The path was different, but their fates were still barreling toward a collision. The freedom Elara felt after altering her destiny was short-lived. Stepping into her university dormitory for the first time, a familiar sense of dread coiled in her stomach. The door was ajar, and inside, surrounded by luxury suitcases and the scent of expensive perfume, stood Serafina Croft. She turned, her face lighting up with a warmth that Elara now knew was a lie. "Elara, what a wonderful coincidence. We're in the same dorm. I guess we're going to be best friends." The words were a chilling echo from another life. Elara's arm was already being linked with Serafina's. The touch felt like ice. In her past life, that gentle linking of arms had been the first thread in a web that would eventually strangle her. Quietly, firmly, Elara extracted her arm. "Sorry, Serafina. I was just moving my luggage. My clothes are dusty. I wouldn't want to mess up your pretty little dress." A flash of pure annoyance, there and gone in a heartbeat, crossed Serafina's features. She recovered instantly, the picture of modest understanding. "Of course. We have all year to get to know each other." The other occupants of the room introduced themselves. There was Fiona, a sharp-eyed journalism major, and Cora, a quiet, composed student of business management. Elara's heart ached looking at them. In her first life, she'd been too wrapped up in her own insecurities and Serafina's glamour to pay them much mind. Now she saw them for what they were, two other bright, hard-working girls just like her. Serafina, ever the orchestrator, insisted they take a group photo to commemorate the start of their college life. As they huddled together, smiling for Serafina's phone, a strange detail struck Elara. She stared at the digital image, her blood running cold. They all looked vaguely similar. Their eyes, the set of their jaws, the shape of their faces. There was a subtle but undeniable resemblance among the four of them. Serafina was the most polished, the most strikingly beautiful, but the foundational blueprint was shared. It was as if they were rough drafts and she was the final, perfected version. A bold, horrifying theory began to form in Elara's mind. This was no coincidence. This dorm assignment, this grouping. Was it possible they were all part of Serafina's twisted long-term plan? Not just her but all of them? High IQ, genetically similar surrogates, pre-selected and gathered for her convenience? The pieces from her past life began to click into a more monstrous picture. Serafina had been tragically injured at age 6, heroically trying to save the Thorne twin brothers, Cashin and Julian, from kidnappers. The injury had robbed her of the ability to have children. The Thorne family, eternally grateful, had pledged their unwavering support to the Crofts and promised Serafina her place as their daughter-in-law regardless. But powerful families need heirs. Surrogates were a simple, clinical solution. But Serafina and the Thorns wanted more. They wanted control. They wanted the illusion of love. What better than to choose brilliant, beautiful girls from prestigious schools? Girls who could be wooed, who would believe in a fairy tale, and who would willingly give their bodies and souls. And when they were no longer useful, they could be discarded, shamed for daring to dream above their station. Among them, Elara was the poorest, the most starved for affection, the easiest to manipulate. But Fiona and Cora, they had connections too. He had to know. She began quietly digging. With gentle, careful questions, she learned that Fiona's father worked for the Croft conglomerate. Cora's mother was a mid-level manager at Thorn Corporation. And she, Elara, was the charity case from Oakhaven County that Silas Croft had once tried to sponsor. The three of them were all connected to Serafina. They were all top scorers. They all shared a disturbing physical resemblance. The web was real and they were all caught in it. Elara threw herself into her studies with a frantic intensity, using the library as a fortress. She avoided Serafina's invitations to five-star dinners and politely declined the lavish gifts of designer handbags that were offered to the roommates. Fiona accepted with gushing enthusiasm. Cora accepted with polite, distant gratitude, but the bag was never used, left to gather dust in her drawer. Serafina was patient. She played the role of the humble, kind-hearted rich girl perfectly. But Elara could feel the clock ticking. The first test came just before winter break. Serafina made her announcement in the dorm. "Tomorrow is my 18th birthday. My father is hosting a coming-of-age banquet for me. You all have to come, okay? I'll have a driver pick you up." Elara's instinct was to refuse, to hide, to run. But Fiona, eyes gleaming with the promise of a sensational story for her journalism class, begged to be allowed to film it. A memory assaulted Elara. This was the banquet where she had first been introduced to Cassian and Julian Thorn. Where Julian had begun his predatory pursuit of her. This was where it all began. But this time she wouldn't be walking in blind. She changed her tactic, encouraging Fiona's filming. "It'll help her complete her project and also raise awareness about your family's charitable work," she said to Serafina, her smile perfectly neutral. "Plus, it'd be nice to have some video memories of your big day, wouldn't it?" Cora, picking up on Elara's strange shift, agreed to attend. Serafina, always hungry for positive publicity, readily agreed. She saw it as free PR for her personal brand. They were walking into the lion's den, but this time they were armed with a camera. The next morning, a sleek town car picked them up. During the ride, Elara's chest tightened with a familiar, suffocating anxiety. She dug her nails into her palm, using the sharp pain to ground herself. Today she would see Julian Thorn again. The man who had told her he fell in love at first sight. The man who had crashed into her world with roses, sketches and drone shows. The man whose touch she had once craved and now made her skin crawl. Today the game would truly begin. The Croft estate was a monument to opulence. Stepping through the grand gates was like entering another world, one of shimmering fountains, manicured lawns and the low, expensive hum of luxury. Elara kept her expression neutral, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. The grandeur that had once intimidated her now only seemed garish and hollow. Serafina greeted them at the entrance, a vision in a gown studded with what looked like real diamonds. She gleamed under the afternoon sun, a carefully crafted jewel. And standing behind her, like twin statues of arrogant perfection, were Cassian and Julian Thorn. They were even more imposing in person than in Elara's memory. Handsome, with an air of effortless superiority that came from generations of wealth and privilege. Their eyes swept over Fiona, Cora, and Elara with a detached, analytical curiosity that made Elara feel like livestock at an auction. Fiona gasped. "Serafina, they're like movie stars." Serafina laughed, a tinkling, modest sound. "These are my gorgeous roommates," she announced to the brothers. "All national top scorers. Beautiful, brilliant, the whole package. Real high-quality women." The condescension was veiled as a compliment. The Thorns' gazes lingered, that strange evaluative intensity still present. When Julian's eyes finally met Elara's, a jolt of pure, undiluted fear shot down her spine. She shuddered violently. Cora, ever observant, stepped closer and gently took her arm. "Elara, are you okay?" I need to use the restroom," Elara stammered, pulling away and fleeing into the house. Inside the pristine bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, gripping the marble sink until her knuckles turned white. She could still feel the ghost of his touch, the memory of his lies. He had hunted her and she had willingly walked into his trap. When she stepped out, he was there, leaning casually against the wall opposite the door as if he'd been waiting. "You're scared of me," he stated, his voice a soft, mocking murmur. Elara refused to look at him directly. She forced a weak, self-deprecating laugh. "Not at all. I'm just not used to fancy places like this." Without another word, she brushed past him and hurried back to the garden to find her friends. She found Fiona and Cora behind the villa, admiring a massive temperature-controlled greenhouse. It was filled with a breathtaking sea of Serafina's favorite flowers, white roses. Fiona sighed wistfully. "She's just like these roses, you know? Noble, pure, pampered in a glass house." Her voice then dipped with a vulnerability Elara recognized. "I worked like a dog to be a top scorer. But here everyone is. Sometimes I'm so jealous of her. She never flaunts it, but I still feel inferior." Cora, ever calm, said, "Some things, if you're not born with them, you'll never have them no matter how hard you work." Elara looked at them, these two bright women already being crushed by the weight of comparison. "Being myself is good enough," she said, her voice firm. "I come from a poor county. My mother died giving birth to me. My father abandoned me. My aunt raised me. But I'm here. After graduation I'll become a doctor. The world is wide enough for people like us to do something great." Her words seemed to lift their spirits, forging a silent bond between the three of them. Fiona, energized, began scouting angles for the evening's fireworks display, assigning them all positions to capture the best footage. It was then that they saw them. Serafina, hand in hand with both Cashin and Julian, slipped into the greenhouse. The door clicked shut behind them. Driven by a shared, unspoken instinct, the three girls ducked behind a row of pear trees, peering through the glass. What they saw inside made their blood run cold. The three of them were intertwined, their energy intimate and possessive. Serafina clung to both brothers as if she belonged to neither, and both simultaneously. "Julian, you promised me, remember?" Serafina's voice, sweet and coaxing, carried through the glass. "I'm the one who gets to choose your girlfriend. Of my three roommates, which one do you want? I'll help you pursue her." But we agreed. "No matter what, you can't fall for any of them. You're only allowed to love me." Julian kissed her and chuckled. "They're not even worth your toenail. Of course I wouldn't want any of them. I'm just doing what you asked, finding a girlfriend to be our cover." Cashin chimed in, his voice cold and practical. "Serafina, you were hurt saving us. You lost your ability to have children, but maybe that's a blessing. You won't have to suffer through pregnancy. Whoever Julian chooses will just be our surrogate. If any of them ends up making you sad, we'll take the child and cut ties for good. No complications." Serafina smiled, a smug, victorious expression, and began to playfully roll around in the piles of white rose petals with them. Behind the pear trees, Elara, Fiona, and Cora stared at each other in stunned, horrified silence. The carefully constructed illusion had been shattered completely. Fiona's hand was clamped over her own mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She held up her camera, its recording light still glowing a faint red. "Pi camera," she whispered, her voice shaking. It was still recording. "I caught all of it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. They watched, numb, as Cashin stood under a sky erupting in expensive fireworks and publicly declared his love for Serafina. They said their goodbyes to the euphoric birthday girl, their faces masks of polite congratulations. Only when the car door closed and they were speeding away from the estate did the dam break. Back in the safety of their dorm, Fiona exploded. "So she's been in a three-way relationship with the Thorne brothers this whole time. And they're trying to use one of us as a cover and a womb." It was time. Elara told them everything. She omitted the impossible truth of her rebirth, but shared all her suspicions. The donated scholarship, the connected families, the physical resemblances, the preordained dorm assignment. Fiona, furious, grabbed the luxury handbag Serafina had given her and threw it into the trash. "I'm uploading that video. I'm exposing them. Don't be impulsive." Cora interjected, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "If this goes public, what about your father's job? My mother's position? Do you really want to go up against both the Crofts and the Thornes? It's a losing battle. You'll ruin your own future." The room fell into a heavy, hopeless silence. The evidence was damning, but their opponents were too powerful. After a long pause, Elara finally spoke, her voice low but steady. Taking them down might be difficult, but avoiding the trap is still in our hands. As long as we reject Julian's advances, we won't be drawn in. That much at least we can control. They had the truth. They had the video. But they were playing a dangerous game with players who held all the power. The next move was theirs, and Elara knew it would be coming soon. The next day, Serafina returned to the dorm, her demeanor unchanged, a masterpiece of innocent cheer. She immediately began testing the waters, casually bringing up Julian and gauging their reactions. Fiona was ready. She waved her off, showing a photo of herself cheek to cheek with a cousin. Actually, I already have a boyfriend. We were classmates in high school. He's at a neighboring college. It was a flimsy excuse, but it would have to do for now. Cora dodged with practiced politeness. Julian and I are from completely different worlds. Honestly, if it weren't for your birthday party, Serafina, I would have never had a chance to meet someone like him. Elara echoed the sentiment, layering on a thick dose of flattery. Serafina, you and Julian are perfect together. It's a shame you're an only child. If you had a twin sister, maybe she and Julian would have made a great match. Serafina's smile remained fixed, but a flicker of frustration showed in her eyes. Their indifferent, almost dismissive responses were not what she had expected. For the next few weeks, an uneasy calm settled over the dorm. Julian didn't appear with roses. There were no grand, public gestures. It seemed their strategy of polite rejection was working. Elara allowed herself a sliver of hope. She buried herself in her studies, taking on extra tutoring jobs during the approaching winter break to earn more money and ease her aunt's burden. She was in the library every day from open to close, finding solace in the rigid logic of textbooks and anatomy diagrams. Then the blow came from a direction she hadn't fully anticipated. As she stepped out of the library one afternoon, a middle-aged man she had never seen before blocked her path. He was unshaven, his clothes shabby, and he smelled of cheap alcohol. "Elara!" he shouted, his voice slurred and overly loud. People began to stop and stare. "I'm your father. I heard you got into Ethelred University, so I borrowed money to come see you." He grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "I owe a lot of money. The debt collectors are after me. I need someone to co-sign for me. You're the most successful, top scorer, Ethelred student. You have to save me." Elara tried to pull away, her face burning with a mixture of fear and humiliation. This hadn't happened in her past life. Her mind raced. She scanned the gathering crowd of students, and then she saw him. Leaning against a pillar near the back, watching the scene with detached interest, was Julian Thorne. A rich heir like him would never come to the library of his own accord. This was staged. This was Emily's plan B, a damsel in distress scenario, scripted for Julian to swoop in as the heroic savior. When Julian realized Elara had spotted him, he stepped forward, his expression shifting to one of concerned authority. He moved through the crowd with an air of innate privilege. "Elara is my friend," he announced calmly to the man. "If it's money you need, you came to the wrong place. The Thorne family doesn't lack money, and this entire library was donated by us." He turned his cool gaze on the man. "How much do you owe?" "I'll pay it." The man's face lit up with fake gratitude. He immediately released Elara's arm. "You'll help me? Are you Elara's friend or her boyfriend?" he asked loudly. "I owe 500,000 yuan. Compared to donating an entire library, that's just pocket change. If Elara has such a rich and generous boyfriend, then our Shao family is truly blessed." Shao family. The name was wrong. Her mother had never married this man. Her birth certificate listed no father. Her household registration was under her grandmother's name. Legally, this man was a stranger. Julian took out his phone, ready to call his family's butler to wire the money. It was the perfect trap. Indebt her to him, embed this chaotic man into her life as a permanent problem only the Thorne wealth could solve. "Wait," Elara said, her voice cutting through the tension. She looked at Julian. "I know you're trying to help, but I don't need it. Not from a man like this. Giving him money will only feed his greed. It won't solve anything." Before Julian or the man could react, she dialed 110 on her phone. "Hello, officer. I'm a student at Ethelred University. Someone is impersonating my father and trying to extort 500,000 yuan from me. The man lunged for her phone. In the scuffle, Elara let herself fall to the ground, scraping her cheek on the pavement. She cried into the phone, "Officer, please help me. He's getting violent." Security arrived, pulling the man away. She then called her academic advisor, a fair and just woman she trusted deeply. The police and her advisor arrived quickly. The officers checked the man's ID. His name was Xiao Qin, a known credit defaulter with a record for gambling and violence. Elara collapsed into her advisor's arms, sobbing convincingly. "Please help me. His surname is Xiao. Mine is Vance. How could he possibly be my father? And right away he asked me for 500,000 yuan. I just turned 18. I earn my tuition through summer jobs. I don't have that kind of money." The authorities confirmed there was no legal relation. The matter should have ended. But Julian, perhaps frustrated his plan was failing, spoke up. "If you want proof, you can do a paternity test. I'll pay for it." Elara's voice turned sharp. "I refuse. He's the one making the claim. He should provide the proof. If anyone can show up and force me to do a DNA test, what kind of world would that be? Officer, does the law allow that?" The officer confirmed that paternity tests required consent from both parties. It was over. Her advisor took her to the station to file a formal report for harassment. "You've been through a lot, Elara," her professor said gently. "That man will not affect your life again." Back at the dorm, she told a furious Fiona and a shaken Cora everything. "They dug into my background, found that man and hired him," Elara concluded, her voice cold. "They wanted to create a crisis so they could play the heroes." "They're disgusting," Fiona seethed. Cora sighed, her usual composure cracked. "They've got power, wealth, and frightening levels of manipulation. We need to be even more careful." The holiday break provided a temporary respite. Elara worked, saved money, and tried to forget. But when the new semester began, Cora invited them to dinner, her face pale and serious. Before the food even arrived, she downed 2 beers on an empty stomach. "You guys know I come from a single-parent household," she began, her voice unsteady. "My mom raised me on her own. She works at Thorn Corporation. At the company gala, the chairman himself mentioned I share a dorm with Serafina. He personally invited my mom and me." She took a shaky breath. "Julian was there. He was sweet, attentive. Afterward, my mom's coworker said he must be interested in me. Not long after, my mom got a mysterious promotion. Ever since then, she's been encouraging me to get closer to Julian." "Did you tell her the truth?" Fiona asked urgently. "I did," Cora whispered, her eyes blank with despair. "But she didn't believe me. She said, even if it's true, if I work hard I can win him over. And since Serafina can't have children, if I give birth to a child, that baby would be the only heir of the Thorn family." The prize was too tempting. Cora's mother had taken the bait. While they had used coercion on Elara, they were using temptation on Cora. Cora broke down, sobbing. "How can I not listen to her? She sacrificed everything for me." They couldn't make the decision for her. They just sat with her, drinking in miserable silence. The next morning, hungover and heartsick, they were woken by Serafina shaking Cora awake. "Cora, Julian called you so many times. He's downstairs right now with a huge bouquet of roses. I think he's going to confess." Elara's blood ran cold. The script was starting again, but with a new lead actress. Cora sat in a daze for a long moment. Then, with a look of grim resignation, she got up, washed her face, and went downstairs. From their window, Elara and Fiona watched as Cora accepted the roses from Julian Thorn. Serafina and Cashin joined them, and the 4 of them walked off together, the picture of a perfect double date. "I'm afraid this won't end well," Fiona muttered, her voice thick with dread. Watching Cora walk away, a cold, hard resolve crystallized within Elara. In her past life they had ruined her. They had stolen her children and her life. Why had she never thought of revenge? She had been too afraid, too ashamed of her own powerlessness. But things were different now. They weren't powerless. They had the video. They had the truth. She gripped Fiona's hand tightly. "We can't stop her from walking into it," Elara said, her voice low and fierce. "But we can help her win." The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer just about survival. It was about conquest. Cora's descent into the gilded cage followed a script Elara knew by heart. There were library study sessions where little studying was done, awkward meals in the student cafeteria that Julian would never normally set foot in, and public lectures where they sat side by side for show. The grand gesture came on Cora's birthday, a sky full of personalized drone fireworks that lit up the entire campus, proclaiming Julian Thorne's devotion for all to see. Elara and Fiona watched it all from their dorm window, their hearts heavy with a complicated mix of anxiety and grim determination. They played their parts as supportive roommates, all the while working feverishly behind the scenes. Their mission: to find a weakness, a chink in Serafina's perfectly crafted armor. Their break came during the university's annual sports day. Serafina, the glamorous and beloved campus goddess, was the master of ceremonies. After the event, as the crowds dispersed, Elara and Fiona lingered, pretending to pack up equipment. They saw her then. A middle-aged man, his face weathered and covered in faded tattoos, approached Serafina. The moment she saw him, her flawless composure shattered. Her face paled, her smile vanishing. She didn't call security. Instead, she glanced around nervously and quickly pulled him away from the field, toward the empty equipment storage shed. Elara and Fiona shared a look and, moving as silently as shadows, followed them, ducking behind a stack of mats near the open shed door. The man's voice was a low, threatening growl. "Still remember your dear uncle, sweetheart? I heard you're the darling of Ethelred University now, dating the Thorne heir, about to marry into a billionaire dynasty." He took a step closer. "But tell me, would you have gotten that far without your good old uncle clearing the path?" The venom in his voice was palpable. "I spent 12 years in prison for helping your dad stage the kidnapping of those Thorne brothers. Just got out. Your dad's too well protected now. Bodyguards and all. I couldn't get close, so I came to you." He licked his lips, a grotesque gesture. "I'm not asking for much. 1 million a year for 12 years. That's just 12 million yuan. Peanuts for someone like you, right?" Serafina's voice, when she replied, was cold and sharp, stripped of all its usual sweetness. "I'll have my dad contact you. But don't forget, uncle, back then you messed up and stabbed me in the stomach. Because of that, I can't have kids anymore. How do you plan to pay me back for that?" They continued to argue, haggling over the price of silence and the value of a stolen uterus. Behind the mats, Fiona gave Elara a sharp, triumphant nudge. The phone in her hand was held steady, its camera lens capturing every damning word. The red recording light glowed like a single vengeful eye. They slipped away before being discovered, their hearts pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Elara's head was spinning. The foundational myth of Serafina's life, her heroic tragic sacrifice, was a lie. The kidnapping had been orchestrated by Silas Croft. The bravery was a staged performance to gain the Thorne family's eternal gratitude and financial support. Emily was not a victim. She was a co-conspirator, a beneficiary of a monstrous fraud. If the Thornes ever discovered the truth, the entire house of cards would collapse. They immediately showed the video to Cora. She watched it in silence, her face an unreadable mask. When it ended, she didn't cheer or express relief. She was calm, her mind already calculating the political landscape of the family she was being drawn into. "Not yet," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We don't have enough leverage to negotiate with the Thornes. Not yet." Elara looked at her, understanding dawning. "The baby," she stated. Cora nodded. "The baby." They had to wait. They had to let the pregnancy proceed. It was a terrible, calculated risk, but it was the only way to ensure their leverage was absolute. They needed the heir inside her to be their ultimate bargaining chip. So they waited. They let Serafina continue her reign as campus royalty. They watched as Silas Croft's business empire grew ever more entwined with the Thornes' patronage. They bit their tongues as Julian's performative romance with Cora played out in front of the entire school. Time marched on. Fiona and Cora graduated. Elara, in her combined undergraduate medical program, still had years of study ahead. Fiona leveraged her journalism skills and the social media fame from the sports day video, which she edited to show only innocent, crowd-pleasing moments, to become a short video influencer with millions of followers. She was building an army and they didn't even know it. And Cora? Cora was pregnant. The three of them met in a quiet cafe off campus. They looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. They had the weapon. They had the army. They had the truth. Let's reveal everything at graduation, they agreed, their pact sealed. Graduation day arrived, sunny and full of pompous ceremony. Seraphina Croft, as expected, was the star. She was named the university's outstanding graduate, a vision in a custom-designed gown. The jewelry that sparkled at her throat and ears, a set of pink diamonds, reportedly cost tens of millions, an engagement gift from Cashin Thorne. She had signed with a major national news network and was engaged to a top-tier heir. She stood at the pinnacle of her world, radiant and untouchable. From their seats among the graduating class, Elara, Fiona and Cora watched her. Then at the predetermined moment, Cora stood. She walked calmly, purposefully, to the VIP section where the Thorne family sat. She didn't look at Seraphina on stage. She handed a data drive to Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. She said a few quiet words. Elara watched from a distance as the faces of the most powerful couple in the room transformed. Their proud, celebratory expressions dissolved into shock, then disbelief, and finally a cold, terrifying fury. They stood up without a word, without looking at anyone, and gestured sharply for Cashin and Julian to follow them. They left the ceremony abruptly, a black cloud of silence moving through the cheering crowd. Cora followed them out. But before she disappeared through the exit, she turned back. Her eyes found Elara and Fiona in the crowd. She gave them a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was done. The unraveling was swift and merciless. Silas Croft was arrested within days for conspiracy, kidnapping and fraud. He claimed his daughter had been an innocent, unknowing 6-year-old pawn, but it didn't matter. The Thorne Corporation, feeling profoundly and personally betrayed, moved with brutal efficiency. They absorbed the Croft Group, dismantling Silas's empire overnight and erasing the Croft name from the business world. Seraphina's golden life vanished. She was no longer the daughter of a wealthy magnate, but the disgraced child of a convicted criminal. Surprisingly, Cashin Thorne, bound by a twisted sense of loyalty or perhaps the remnants of their corrupted childhood bond, still insisted on honoring the engagement. But according to Cora, the dynamic between the trio was forever poisoned. The love was now laced with bitter resentment and mistrust. The harmony was gone, replaced by a volatile and obsessive tension. Seraphina's mental state, once a carefully controlled performance, began to genuinely fray at the edges. The Thornes' trust in their own sons was deeply shaken. Their reckless behavior in perpetuating the lie had nearly cost the family its legacy and reputation. And into that vacuum of trust and favor stepped Cora. Quietly, intelligently, and with the unwavering support of her mother, who was now horrified by the true nature of the family she had pushed her daughter into, Cora began to consolidate her position. She was carrying the future Thorne heirs. He held the truth. And she had a patience and cunning that Seraphina, in her spoiled entitlement, had never needed to develop. The roles were reversing. The hunter was becoming the hunted and the pawn was moving to claim the board. The engagement of Cashin Thorne to the disgraced Seraphina Croft was a quiet, dismal affair, stripped of the fanfare that should have accompanied a union of two powerful families. It was a transaction of damaged goods, a cage built from pity, obligation and shared history. Meanwhile, Julian's relationship with Cora continued, but the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer the predator. He was the one being managed, his every move watched and assessed by his newly wary parents. Cora navigated it all with a steely grace that left Elara in awe. She played the part of the dutiful, expectant mother-to-be, all the while working alongside her own mother within the Thorne Corporation. They were a formidable team, slowly and carefully gaining the trust of key board members and securing small but significant shares for themselves. Cora's pregnancy was her shield and her sword. Elara, buried in the relentless workload of medical school, watched the societal drama unfold from a distance, through snippets of news and updates from Fiona. Fiona's social media influence had skyrocketed, and she had become a vocal advocate for financial independence and uncovering institutional corruption, themes that resonated deeply with their own experiences, though the public never knew the full story. The final act of their carefully laid plan arrived on a bright spring day. Cora went into labor. With her mother by her side every step of the way, she gave birth to healthy twins, a boy and a girl. The news was met with great celebration within the Thorne family. The heirs had arrived. The legacy was secure. For Serafina, watching from the sidelines as the woman she had chosen as a surrogate basked in the glory that should have been hers, it was a special kind of torture. Elara and Fiona visited the hospital, their hearts pounding with a mix of joy and painful memory for Elara. When she entered the private room and saw the two tiny swaddled infants in Cora's arms, a wave of emotion so powerful it stole her breath washed over her. In another life these could have been her children. The children she had died begging to see. Cora, beaming with a tired but triumphant light, looked up at them. "My babies," she said softly, "have to call you to their godmothers." Tears welled in Elara's eyes. She hadn't gotten to see her own children in her past life, but looking at these two innocent faces, a profound sense of closure and peace settled over her. It felt like a circle, once vicious and broken, had finally been mended. She reached out and gently tapped their tiny curled hands. "Hello, little ones," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm your godmother." In the following months, Cora's influence within the Thorne family grew exponentially. She was no longer just the vessel that carried the heirs. She was a sharp, intelligent business mind. She leveraged her position and her shares to make strategic moves. One of her first acts as a newly empowered figure within the family was to generously invest in a budding media company, installing Fiona as the CEO. Fiona finally had a legitimate platform and the resources to tell the stories that mattered, free from the fear of powerful retaliation. Cora also tried to press a large sum of money into Elara's hands as a thank you. "You saved me," she said simply. "You gave me the weapons to fight my own battle." But Elara, overwhelmed with medical exams and practicals, laughed. "I barely have time to sleep, much less spend money. Save it for the twins' college fund." Then she remembered something, a moment from what felt like a lifetime ago. The day of her rebirth on that sun-drenched stage. "There is one thing though," Elara said, her tone turning thoughtful. "Silas Croft used to donate 500,000 yuan every year to my high school in Oakhaven County. It helped keep kids from dropping out. Now that he's in prison, those funds have probably stopped." She looked at Cora, now a woman who could move millions with a word. "If you're ever looking for a worthy cause." Cora didn't even let her finish. She waved a hand, a gesture that was now effortlessly authoritative. "Consider it done. I'll donate 5 million yuan annually to Oakhaven High." She then fixed Elara with a look. "And the Thorns have a private hospital. Once you graduate and complete your residency, I'll have you installed as the chief of surgery." No arguments. Elara put down the medical textbook she'd been clutching, a genuine grin spreading across her face for the first time in what felt like ages. She gave a mock salute. "Thank you, Queen Cora." She had escaped the trap. She had helped her friends not only survive but thrive. She had a path forward, one she had carved for herself through sheer will and relentless work. The ghosts of her past were finally, truly at rest. She had her own life back and it was just beginning. The gilded cage of the Thorne estate had become a prison of quiet desperation for Serafina. Cashin's sense of duty ensured she wanted for nothing material, but the love and adoration she had once commanded were gone, replaced by a cold, distant courtesy. The truth of the kidnapping had eroded the very foundation of their relationship, leaving behind only the hollow shell of a promise. She was Mrs. Cashin Thorne in name only, a ghost haunting the halls of a home that was never truly hers. Everywhere she looked, she was reminded of her fall from grace. The media, once her fawning playground, now only mentioned her as a tragic footnote, the disgraced daughter of a criminal. The socialite circles that had worshipped her now shut their doors, their whispers a constant venomous hum just beyond her hearing. But the deepest, most festering wound was Cora. Cora, the surrogate, the pawn, the scholarship student from a single-parent household. She was now the rising star of the Thorne dynasty. She lived in the estate's finest wing with Julian and their twins, the beloved grandchildren who had secured the family's future. Mrs. Thorne Sr. doted on Cora, seeing in her the strength and integrity her own sons lacked. Cora's mother, now a trusted advisor within the corporation, was a constant, living reminder of Serafina's own father's failure and incarceration. Serafina's mind, once a sharp tool for manipulation, began to turn in on itself. The obsession and instability that had been simmering for months now boiled over. She spent her days wandering the manicured gardens, her eyes burning with a mixture of self-pity and venomous hatred. She became convinced that Cora had not just stolen her position, but had masterminded her entire downfall. The video evidence, the timing, it was all too convenient. In her twisted reality, she was the victim of an elaborate, malicious plot. Julian, under Cora's influence and his parents' watchful eyes, kept his distance. This rejection, this final abandonment by the boy who had once promised to love only her, was the last straw. The sweet, coaxing girl was gone, completely consumed by a raging, vengeful woman. She began to make scenes. She would accost Cora in the hallways, her voice a shrill accusation of treachery and theft. She tried to turn the household staff against her, spinning tales of Cora's alleged greed and manipulation. But the staff, who saw Cora's genuine care for her children and her respectful demeanor, were wary of the increasingly unhinged woman Cashin had married. Cashin, burdened by guilt and a warped sense of responsibility, tried to reason with her, to placate her. But his attempts only fueled her fury. "You're just like them," she would scream at him. "You're under her spell too. She's taken everything from me. Everything." The final confrontation happened at a family dinner, a tense, awkward affair meant to showcase a facade of unity. Serafina, her eyes wild and her makeup slightly smudged, could no longer contain her rage. She stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Cora, who was calmly feeding one of the twins. "You," Serafina hissed, her voice trembling with malice. "You think you've won? You think you can just sit there in my chair with my family holding the children that should have been mine? You're nothing but a common gold digger, a womb for hire. You and your little friends set me up. You destroyed my father. You stole my life." The room fell into a stunned silence. Cashin tried to pull her back, but she shook him off violently. Cora looked up, her expression not one of anger but of cold, pitying calm. She didn't need to say a word. Her composure was a weapon in itself. It was Mrs. Thorne who spoke, her voice like ice. "Serafina, that is enough. You will apologize to Cora immediately, or you will leave this table." "Apologize to her?" Serafina shrieked, a sound of pure, undiluted hysteria. "She should be apologizing to me. She should be on her knees. I am a Croft. I was a heroine. She is nothing." The word heroine hung in the air, a grotesque joke. Mr. Thorne slammed his hand on the table, making the china rattle. "The only heroism in this family," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "was the courage it took for Cora to expose a decades-old lie that preyed upon our family's gratitude. You are here, Serafina, because of my son's misguided loyalty. Do not mistake that for privilege." The public rebuke from the family patriarch shattered what was left of Serafina's sanity. With a wordless cry of rage, she grabbed a crystal water glass and hurled it across the table. It missed Cora and shattered against the wall behind her. The twins began to wail. In the chaos that followed, as Cashin finally physically restrained her and staff rushed in, Serafina's eyes locked with Cora's. In that moment she didn't see pity or coldness. She saw her own complete and utter defeat reflected back at her. The reckoning was over. She had lost. Not just her status, not just her wealth, but her mind, her dignity, and any last shred of the life she had known. Later that night, under the guise of needing rest and rehabilitation, Cashin, acting on his parents' orders, had Serafina quietly moved to a secluded private sanatorium. It was a beautiful, luxurious prison, far from the city, where her outbursts could be contained and her treatments could begin. The outside world was told she was suffering from a severe, stress-induced illness and needed complete privacy to recover. The door to the gilded cage clicked shut, this time for good. The throne was empty, and Cora now sat at the head of the table, the architect of her own destiny and the protector of a new, more honest dynasty. 5 years later, the hallways of Thorne General Hospital were a familiar rhythm of controlled chaos. Dr. Elara Vance moved through them with a confident ease, her white coat crisp, her stethoscope a comfortable weight around her neck. At 30 years old, she was the youngest chief of surgery in the hospital's history, a position earned through relentless hard work, brilliant acumen, and though few knew it, the unwavering support of the hospital's primary benefactor. She had just finished a complex 8-hour surgery and was reviewing post-op notes when her phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Fiona. A selfie of her and Cora, glasses of champagne raised with the gleaming skyline of the city behind them. The caption read, "Sealing the deal on the new media wing. Tell your med students to start prepping their TED Talks. Miss you, Doc." So, Elara smiled, a genuine warm feeling spreading through her. Fiona's media company, under Cora's strategic funding, had become a powerhouse for ethical journalism and independent storytelling. They were launching a new initiative to fund scientific and medical communications. Another message popped up, this one from Cora. It was a video. Two 5-year-old children, a boy and a girl with Cora's intelligent eyes and the Thorne family's strong features, were in a lavish playroom. They were building an impossibly elaborate structure out of blocks. The little girl looked up at the camera. "Auntie Elara. Auntie Fiona said you fix people's hearts. My doll's heart is broken. Can you fix it when you come for dinner?" The little boy, ever practical, shook his head. "Dolls don't have real hearts, Lily. Auntie Elara is too busy for dolls. She saves real people." Elara's own heart clenched with a love so fierce it was almost painful. These children, Leo and Lily, were her redemption. Every milestone, every birthday, every scraped knee she heard about was a balm on the wound of the children she had lost. She was their godmother in every sense of the word, a constant, loving presence in their lives. He had made sure of it. She typed back a quick reply. "Tell Leo I'm never too busy for you two. And tell Lily I have the perfect thread for doll heart surgery. See you Saturday. Love you." As she put her phone away, a young intern approached her looking nervous. "Dr. Vance? The patient in 304 is asking for you. He's agitated." Room 304. She knew who it was. Julian Thorne. A month ago he'd been admitted after a high-speed car crash. A reckless accident that spoke of a deep, unresolved turmoil. His injuries had been severe, and Elara had personally overseen his surgery. The irony was not lost on her. He walked into the room. Julian was propped up in bed, his face pale and drawn, his body encased in casts and braces. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by pain and vulnerability. He looked ordinary. His eyes met hers as she entered. There was no mockery now, only a profound exhaustion. "The nurse said you saved my life," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's my job," Elara replied, her tone professional, checking his chart. "I know it was you," he continued, ignoring her detachment. "Cora and Fiona. They had the motive. But it was you who knew how to destroy us. You were always the smartest one in that room." Elara stopped writing and looked at him. She didn't confirm or deny it. He just waited. "I dream about it sometimes," he murmured, looking out the window. "The greenhouse. The roses. I dream that you were there that day listening. I dream that you looked at me with such hatred." Elara remained silent. The truth was a weapon she no longer needed to wield. He was already a prisoner of his own consequences. "She's gone, you know," he said suddenly, his voice barely a whisper. "Serafina. Cashin had her moved to a facility in Switzerland. She doesn't recognize anyone anymore." Elara felt a pang of something, not pity, but a grim acknowledgement of a tragedy that had been set in motion long before she was reborn. A tragedy of greed and parental ambition that had consumed a young girl and twisted her into a monster. "I'm sorry," she said, and she found that she meant it. She was sorry for the 6-year-old girl who had been used as a pawn by her father. But she was not sorry for the woman that pawn had become. Julian looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a glimpse of the man he might have been without the corruption of his upbringing. "You won," he stated simply. Elara shook her head. "It was never about winning, Julian. It was about surviving. It was about making sure the cycle ended with us." She finished her notes and turned to leave. "Elara," he called out as her hand touched the door. She paused but didn't turn around. "The children. Leo and Lily, they adore you." "I know," she said softly. "The feeling is mutual." She walked out, closing the door gently behind her. The hallway was bright, leading toward the bustling nurse's station, toward her next patient, toward her future. She had not just survived. She had built a life of purpose and meaning on the ashes of her past. She was a doctor, a godmother, a friend, a survivor. She had kept her promise to herself. She was free. And she had ensured that 2 beautiful, innocent children would never have to be pieces in anyone's twisted game. The cursed cycle was broken, and in its place she had built a legacy of healing. The end.